Thank you very much. I will be emphasizing the oral nature of this presentation, seeing as the information that I will be conveying, I don't think need charts or slides to make the point. Next to me is, well, firstly, I am Ernst van Zyl. I'm the head of public relations at AfriForum, and next to me is Louis Boshoff. He is a campaigns officer at AfriForum. And thank you for the opportunity to do an oral presentation. AfriForum has also, as you are aware, made a written submission to your institution, and I know that you have that as well under eyes. So today I actually want to use the opportunity to add to our submission on many of the themes that are discussed in it, but not repeating what you already know, otherwise already know from our written submission, otherwise it would just be duplication. And the title or the theme that I want to touch on specifically today is Starlink's potential to bridge the digital gap between urban and rural in South Africa. So firstly, from AfriForum's side, I think it's important to put the context on the table. So AfriForum is a civil rights organization that represents over 315,000 donating members. And our members, a lot of our members are situated in rural areas and also on farms. So therefore, our submission today will revolve particularly around giving a voice to those members that will be affected by the decisions made here today. So firstly, the Minister of Communication has stated recently that when it comes to Starlink in South Africa, it is a welcome development and that it demonstrates the power of public, and it's a welcome development, stated that there will be an amendment to the BEE rules to allow Starlink to operate in South Africa, and from AfriForum's side, this is a welcome development and demonstrates the power of public pressure. In recent months, AfriForum has been busy with a multifaceted pressure campaign to have the regulatory barriers blocking Starlink in South Africa, in particular race-based policies, amended. And aside from the fact that race-based regulations blocking Starlink are unjustifiable, this technology would be a massive benefit to millions in South Africa, and that's where I want to enrich our written submission by adding further information to it. Those set to especially benefit would be rural communities and farms where cell phone signal is erratic or often absent, and where physical internet infrastructure won't reach anytime soon. I come from a farming community, so I know all the benefits that are still yet to be unlocked for many of these types of communities. While some who live in urban areas are quick to downplay, mostly on social media, ironically, the potential benefits of Starlink, the data paints a very stark picture. Just over 10% of South African households have access to internet at home, while about 17% of metropolitan households have home access to internet. Only 1.7% of rural households have this luxury, and I think luxury can be underlined in that sense. Rural households in Limpopo had the lowest percentage of access with only 0.6%, followed close behind by the Northwest Province with an abysmal 0.8% access. It is within this context of the urban-rural home internet access divide which Starlink holds the biggest potential for a positive impact. Starlink's technology will provide rural communities and the agriculture sector with much-needed stable internet connection, which will assist with education, business, and most importantly, security, a field where AfriForum has a lot of experience in, seeing as we are involved in many community-based safety networks in rural areas. Laying fiber optic cables in isolated areas is expensive and difficult and time-consuming due to the various geographical challenges in many of these areas. Because Starlink service is satellite-based, it can easily bypass these challenges, specifically challenges related to geography. Because Starlink service also can traverse these challenges, it makes it ideal in regards to bridging that gap between rural and urban. When it comes to specifically physical infrastructure, eliminating the need for extensive physical internet infrastructure and thus bringing connectivity to South Africa's most isolated regions, I can't really see any other option than at least allowing Starlink access to the market. It doesn't mean it is granted a monopoly or it cannot be challenged in a competitive way by any other service provider, but it cannot be blocked. It is the potential benefits would be too valuable to ignore. In addition to that, allowing Starlink to operate in South Africa would save the government billions of internet infrastructure, billions of rands on internet infrastructure expansion projects. This is because Starlink provides its own infrastructure, but due to the very nature of its operations. Currently, only about 15 of the 54 African countries do not have a time frame for Starlink availability. Starlink has already been launched in 4 of South Africa's 6 neighboring countries, namely Eswatini, Botswana, and Mozambique, with Zimbabwe being the latest beneficiary. Namibia and Lesotho's deadlines will be before the end of 2024. And by the end of 2024, then it will leave by the end of 2024, it has left South Africa the only one without a deadline. The improved communication capabilities enabled by Starlink would greatly assist in crime prevention, specifically in rural areas, and this is where AfriForum, as I said earlier, has a lot of experience, particularly in regards to response times. South Africa is facing a serious crime problem, especially in rural areas. The persistent scourge of farm attacks in South Africa, for example, is one of the many manifestations of the rural security crisis that we are experiencing. An added complication is the fact that during load shedding or rolling blackouts, cell phone reception becomes weak or disappears due to theft of cell phone tower batteries. I've had many farmers and people who live in rural areas reach out to me in the months since the news has broken that there is a possibility that Starlink will be allowed in South Africa. People reaching out to me from these areas saying that this would be a godsend to them. Starlink availability would enable better response times for emergency services, as well as improve the communication capabilities of community safety structures. A stable internet connection, for example, is crucial for farm security in the form of emergency communication and security cameras that cover your entire property, which is often vast, especially in provinces like the Northern Cape. There will also be a positive impact on commercial fishing safety. The National Sea Rescue Institute, NSRI, declared recently that Starlink will bolster their ability to respond to emergencies. In the field of healthcare, there are also many benefits to be had. Rural South Africa has a dire lack of healthcare infrastructure, and access to quality medical services is fraught with challenges. Having access to Starlink will make it possible for patients in remote areas to contact healthcare professionals that are far away. The telemedicine consultations and diagnoses that Starlink makes possible could save many lives, seeing as it cancels out the long travel times currently associated with these for many. The availability of reliable internet can also empower healthcare workers in remote areas with improved access to information and analysis. As pointed out by journalist Hanu Labuskaghni, an example of a rural problem Starlink addresses is where charity organizations have to travel between isolated areas where patients live and areas with cell signal in order to send x-rays to doctors for analysis. Then there's the matter of education, business, and social benefits. The primary beneficiaries in rural areas of Starlink services would be schools and farms. Only the online schooling or homeschooling that Starlink enables would be a welcome alternative to post-based education or having to attend schools hundreds of kilometers away. Existing schools in rural communities would benefit greatly from reliable internet access, and online education and research resources will also be made available to students and teachers in these remote schools. On the business side of agriculture, access to Starlink could be a game changer in how it facilitates the latest automating agricultural technologies through the extensive connectivity coverage it enables for farms. Through this technology, even the most isolated farmers and rural businesses gain the opportunity to communicate with others in their industry. And also to buy and sell through online platforms and expand their market reach. The resulting growth in local business will naturally lead to more job opportunities as well as stimulate the local economy. a game farmer recently told me that they use tracking technology in regards to keeping track of their livestock of their game as they move about on their farms. But that is impossible if you do not have a reliable internet connection, which enables livestock theft and game theft and poaching. On the social side, a stable internet connection enables those who live in rural areas access to new sources of news and information, an ability to connect with friends and family far away and to more effectively communicate within their community. High-speed quality communication between isolated neighboring farms, for example, would be no problem at all with this technology. My Broadband recently reported how Starlink made it possible for an elderly couple in rural KwaZulu-Natal to communicate with emergency services and their family for the first time. And in conclusion, while there currently exists an internet access canyon between rural and urban South Africa, satellite-based technology such as Starlink provides the logical technological bridge. By 2025, if the government's regulatory barriers stay in place, South Africa is on course to be the only country out of its neighbors to not have Starlink. And for Starlink to be blocked based on racial grounds just adds insult to injury. A stunning example of a bitter harvest, and therefore the many people who will benefit from this technology in rural areas, the many people living on farms and who are farmers, cannot be here today to state their case all collectively. So I use my opportunity to give them a voice at this forum, and I look forward to answering your questions, whatever they may be. Thank you very much for the opportunity. I really appreciate it, and thank you for your time.
Thank you very much to the representatives from AfriForum. Councillor Mushi, would you like to go first? Do you have a question? Okay, there's a question from Pascalis.
Sure.
And this one? Yeah. Okay.
All right.
If he doesn't ask it, I'll come after Pascalis then. Thank you.
Just one question, Chair. Why the focus on Starlink and not sort of any other high throughput satellite service provider that provides the same services? Why satellite, or why Starlink specifically? Yeah.
From AfriForum side, our research shows that Starlink appears to be the premier technology when it comes to satellite-based internet in South Africa. And as I said at the beginning of my presentation, any other companies out there that are willing and able to provide the same type of service, AfriForum's arguments would be exactly the same for them, whether domestic or abroad. But Starlink is the premier example, and I think perfect case study to make all of these points very clearly.
Thank you. You can add, and then we'll take 2 rounds of questions before you answer.
Just to add to that, there was the previous presentation from Eutelsat, which I believe can enable a similar low Earth orbit internet access, while in South Africa, as far as I'm aware, there's no other, well, actually globally, there's no other satellite constellation which can provide this kind of internet access. And secondly, the focus on Starlink specifically comes from queries from some of our members and even non-AfriForum members, just general members of the public who approach the AfriForum and say, we have a need for Starlink internet, and then they named it specifically as Starlink internet. So it's not that there's any specific ties between AfriForum and Starlink or whatever. It's just the name that has been mentioned to us from the public from the start throughout.
Thank you. Bethwell, and then Councillor Mushi, and then I will come in after them.
All right.
Thank you for your presentation. It's well noted. As you are aware, ICASA is actually subject to the law. In everything that ICASA does, it's subject to the law. The ICASA Act is very clear. Now, if you look at Section 9.2b of the Electronic Communications Act, on the aspect of historically disadvantaged persons. So every person that requires a license an individual license specifically, they need to make sure that at least they have 30% equity ownership from historically disadvantaged persons. So I'm not even speaking about your broad-based black economic empowerment. That's another leg in terms of Section 43K of the ICASA Act. So I'm just focusing on this aspect of historically disadvantaged persons. Now, if you consider that, and the fact that that is contained in a legislation, us as ICASA, what do you recommend ICASA to do in terms of the presentation that you just gave us now? Thank you.
I think there's another question.
Yes, there's one more question from Councillor Mushi. Or would you like to come in a separate?
I think let them take the
Okay, please
Sure.
respond to Bethwell, then Councillor Mushi and I will come in.
So from AfriForum's side, our recommendation is particularly in regards to the amendments being talked about, and the amendment should create the space where race is not a barrier to companies like Starlink in South Africa. When it comes to particularly who will benefit, well, on the one side, you have the option of a small handful of people benefiting through the race criteria that is currently in place, or you can have millions of South Africans benefit due to having access to a reliable alternative when it comes to internet technology. So I would say the small handful benefiting from the racial criteria or the formerly disadvantaged criteria pales in comparison to the amount of people that will benefit from the access to this technology.
Councillor Mushi.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, AfriForum, for your presentation. I just want to confirm that you are saying you have done an impact study and your submission is based on fact. If it is the case, if you don't mind, please share the study with us, because I'm really interested to see how you have compared Starlink to other services. But my comment was also similar to Bethwell's, that says our inquiry was not focused on just a certain service provider, but on a broader representation of service providers, which in this case is satellite services. So I'm quite concerned that your submission is based on a service provider limited to just the licensing framework, when the inquiry was broader than that. And the intention of the inquiry is broader than just, dropping or enforcing the HDG requirement. And indeed, we are a creature of statute. We are in the business of ICASA's mandate. Oh, please mute, yeah. ICASA's mandate is to implement the objects of the ECA equitably so. If it is that the BBBEE legislation is racial, I think this is not the platform, because we implement the law as it is. Your submission would have a place in the amendment of the BBBEE in that regard. So in as far as we are concerned, we are licensing according to the ECA. And until the ECA is amended, ICASA will license accordingly. I want to also say satellite services are not new in South Africa. There are a lot of satellite operators in South Africa. It comes across as if we are seeing satellite services for the first time. And I'm struggling a little bit with that kind of messaging that seems to be coming through from you, that it seems as if we are now addressing a new service category, which is not the case. Yeah, I think I've covered my points, that your Starlink pitch that it will bridge the digital divide makes me want to ask you, as I said, satellite services are not new. Why do you think that or have you done a study that tells you that other service providers could not bridge the digital divide using satellite services, and for what reasons? And you seem to be suggesting that Starlink knows how to mitigate, you know, those kind of barriers. If you can also just share your knowledge with us on that. Thanks.
Sure. So firstly, the question about AfriForum's focus in our presentation. I do understand that ICASA's focus is very broad. AfriForum's focus is precisely by the nature of our organization very narrow. I can only provide a voice to those that we represent and those who need us to be a voice for them. And I can only represent effectively those who have reached out to AfriForum asking us to give them a voice at these types of platforms. Therefore, our focus on these particular matters. When it comes to the observation that satellite services are nothing new in South Africa, well, absolutely, that solidifies and enforces AfriForum's point. If these effective satellite internet services have been around for decades in South Africa, yet the digital divide between the urban and the rural remains, that means that they are failing in filling that divide and bridging that divide. Therefore, we need alternatives to enter the market and to allow them to enter the market. Otherwise, the void is going to remain. Otherwise, we're just going to be seeing more of the same. As you said correctly, satellite services in South Africa are nothing new, and they have not been able to bridge that divide. Therefore, we need an alternative to be used, or to be at least allowed. When it comes to particularly why the focus on Starlink, well, that, as my colleague has emphasized, that is the name that keeps coming up when people ask, when people particularly are members and members of the public contact AfriForum about their concerns regarding lacking internet connectivity in their rural areas. They always bring up the fact that Starlink will solve, according to them, this problem, but they can't. They can't even try Starlink at the moment due to the regulatory barriers in place. Therefore, AfriForum stands again giving a voice to these members of the public and members of AfriForum, giving them a voice in particularly that matter of why can't they even just try this new technology? The divide remains. Even if satellite technology is nothing new, it has clearly failed to bridge the divide.
Just to add to that, regarding the point of satellite internet not being new, and I believe some of the other presenters here might have more technical knowledge regarding this, but even though GNSS satellite internet services have been around for literally decades, the internet connection through low Earth orbit satellite constellations such as Starlink, which is by far the biggest of these, and then Eutelsat OneWeb as well. This is quite new, not only in South Africa, but globally. But as we are seeing, South Africa is falling behind, not only in comparison to the rest of the globe, but in comparison to other African countries, sub-Saharan African countries as well. And then to the point of ICASA implementing the law as it is, we completely understand your position, but we are asking from AfriForum side, from our members side, from those who we are speaking for, that ICASA also be a voice to the legislator and say, as ICASA, with our expertise, we are seeing this is the need of the hour, and these are the legislative barriers towards better internet access for South Africans. So to the legislators, try remove these barriers so that we can implement the law and increase internet availability to all South Africans.
Thanks, Chair. Yes, just one question I asked, if you did an impact study and that you can factually present the study to us to prove what you are saying, that Starlink has a higher potential. Not that it's part of this inquiry, but also just to ask if you do realize that the current HDG includes white people, Indians, it's not black. So this racial discussion, is it well placed within the HDG requirement? Thanks.
Well, firstly, I think it is absolutely well placed. If it wasn't well, if there weren't any racial criteria being talked about, why does that point keep coming up in any discussion surrounding the barriers to Starlink in South Africa? There's absolutely a racial element to it, and I think that needs to be at least acknowledged. I don't think we can really hide our heads in the sand like an ostrich when it comes to these types of criteria. They need to be removed in order to increase internet connectivity for South Africans all across the country. When it comes to particularly an impact study, I mean, that AfriForum is fully equipped to be able to do it, but I think the facts are obvious enough. I don't really think if Starlink was not the perfect alternative, then you would have had local or other alternatives already fill that gap. I don't see why we are even shutting the door just to seeing what Starlink will do, rather than actually allowing Starlink into South Africa, seeing whether if it is not a better alternative, it will fail and Starlink will be gone within less than a year. It will have been an abject failure if it does not bring a better alternative. So AfriForum's stance is very simple. At least allow a competitive alternative to very clearly the fail or the inadequate options that have been on the table to this point, and we'll see what happens. As I said, if Starlink is not a better alternative, it will come into South Africa, fail, and it will be gone the next day. That's how the market works.
Thank you very much. I do have a few questions that I'd like to ask, and I think your submission has really awoken the economist in me. So I first want to start by just outlining some key things that I noted from your submission. You say Starlink has the potential to bridge the digital gap, and this is particularly pointed towards your members who are based in rural areas and farming communities. And then you also point to the minister's media statement around equity equivalence. Now, you also mentioned that, what is currently in the market only benefits a small handful. And then you mentioned something about, Then you mentioned the crime stats and the benefits that would come from satellite connectivity. I won't repeat what has already been said by the previous speakers on the panel and the questions that they've posed to you. But I do want to put it to you, or just ask you to consider and perhaps give us your views on what you've submitted today. Firstly, in your submission, and if you would allow me, I'd like to read it out. Since the creation of the Union of South Africa in 1910, approximately 313 race-based laws have been introduced, of which nearly 37, in brackets, 116 plus, have been enacted since the ANC became the ruling party in 1994. If my social science math serves me right, 37% of enacted racial laws only leaves a balance of 63% of racially based laws that then acted against a majority, which accounts for 81% of the South African population, as against to 7% of the South African population that it then favored. Secondly, you spoke about the fact that your community and the people that this satellite technology, in particular Starlink, would be serving are rural-based. According to statistics, a huge majority of South African population is based in the rural areas, as you said in your presentation. Statistics also tell us that the average income of a rural household is 5,000 Rand per month. That is a very generous allocation. I'm a rural born and raised girl, so I know it's a lot less. It actually says in the statistics that this number is only pushed up by the farming community, which is predominantly white community. So do you really believe that a technology like Starlink whose pricing point could possibly be above the 5,000, which is the affordability measure, be serving 81% of the population which sits in rural areas? Or would it be serving a fraction of the 7%, which is the farming community? That's my first question. And then my second question is about the mention of the minister's equity equivalence. As mentioned by my colleague, ICASA regulates through statute, and ICASA only takes policy direction or policy consideration once it is issued. We cannot, unfortunately, consider any policy suggestions that come through the media. If the minister writes to us through a policy directive, the legislation in the ICASA Act allows us to consider what the minister says and then regulate what we see fit according to our knowledge of the market. So do you think that it is rightly placed to bring an argument that comes from the media or a broad statement that comes from the media to an institution that is grounded in the Constitution of the Republic and an institution that is bound by legislation?
Thank you very much. I'm very glad that you bring up the conversation, or you bring the conversation centered around the crux, and the crux is still racialist policy in South Africa. Thank you very much. I really want to use this opportunity to contribute towards the changing zeitgeist, because the wind is turning against racialist policy all across the world, particularly in South Africa. Cannot really ignore it. Let's start off with the race-based policies statistics. Absolutely. Thank you for listing in the race-based policy statistics that AfriForum mentioned in our written submission. Saves me the time that I don't have to do it again. When it comes to particularly the new South Africa post-1994, I really challenge those who support racialist policies to explain why you are advocating that you fix a wrong with another wrong. You do not fix a pothole by digging a new pothole to fill it. You do not create a non-racial society through racialist policies. You do not foster a society that puts less emphasis on race by putting more emphasis on race. You do not create a society where people judge people based on the content of their character rather than the color of their skin by telling them that every facet of society should be taking into account the color of their skin. So when it comes to South Africa in 2025, absolutely, I think it is unjustifiable that we still have 141 race laws on the books. I don't think that can be justified in any way other than explicitly stating to the world that South Africa is not a non-racialist society, but a deeply racialist one. If you want to wear that badge with honor on your chest, you are allowed to. I do not personally want to wear that badge on my chest, as I am a non-racialist, not a racialist. When it comes to particularly the question about rural South Africa and the income levels of it, sure, absolutely. I come from a small farming community myself. I do understand that in rural South Africa, income levels do not compare favorably to urban South Africa. But that's why the benefits of scale make it so much more affordable for people in rural South Africa. It's the same concept as creating a water point. Instead of creating laying down pipes to relay water to every single house, you put up a communal water point where everyone can get access to water. The same goes for internet infrastructure, where if you create a central point like a school or a library that has access to internet, you distribute it on a wide basis, you get a much, much cheaper end result when it comes to how much people have to pay to get access to a collective good. That's just simple economics. When it comes to particularly benefiting people in rural communities, that's exactly why AfriForum mentioned examples like education, where if a school has access to Starlink, it gives internet access to all the children in that school, and the school itself can divide the cost of having one Starlink satellite or one Starlink satellite dish, can divide up that cost between all the people that are funding that school. So not one person or a handful of people have to fund it. It creates a much cheaper alternative. So when it comes to particularly the point of, in South Africa, looking at the rural-urban divide, I think this is the most logical answer to bridging that divide. If it was not, I mean, I'm open to alternative suggestions. They seem to be astounding and brilliant in their absence. I think give alternatives a chance. Let's see. If the alternative doesn't work, as I said, it will fail, it will be gone tomorrow. Starlink is a profit-based business. It's not a charity. If it is here to, if it comes to South Africa to make a profit and it is an abject failure, then they will be gone by the next day, and nobody will have to worry about them ever again.
Thank you. I do have a rebuttal, but I note we also have a question from the panel. I just want to say that in your submission, your entire submission is based on race, and yet you ask the authority not to consider race. Let me finish, please.
Sure.
Thank you. And then we go on to build all your arguments around what you term as racially based laws, and if I can quote, increasingly racially obsessed environment. Now, in my view, if I may make an analogy, if you are running a race and you want to level the playing field, do you allow those who have trained the hardest, who have won before, to start 100 meters ahead because they are professionals? Or do you allow everyone to start at the starting point and then allow everyone to have a level playing field and everyone to participate fairly? Unfortunately, it may not be apparent, and ICASA is not a racial driven institution in how it regulates or how it makes laws. We are about ensuring that we serve the public. That is our main consideration. And our mandate is for the betterment of all South Africans who live in it. So I just wanted to make that clear, that ICASA is not blocking any particular operator. We are not prohibiting any particular operator. This inquiry is intended to open this form of technology to allow more players. Whether the players come from the north, the west, the south, or the east, that is neither here nor there for ICASA, as long as they abide to the laws.
Thank you. I'll I think this is the last opportunity to answer, but I'll be quick. Firstly, when it comes to it's a strange point to say that AfriForum is race-obsessed because we are fighting against the focus on race. That's like saying someone fighting a dragon should not mention the dragon. We are fighting race-based policies. Of course, we're going to mention the word race, and we're going to mention a race obsession. Doesn't mean we are pro that. We are fighting exactly against that. To answer your question regarding the idea that you should be giving some people have a head start and other people don't, the whole idea of race-based policies in South Africa, the exact problem with it is that it doesn't take individual circumstances into account. Race-based policies in South Africa, when race-based policies have to choose between the son or daughter of a rich politician and the son or daughter of an unemployed white South African, race-based policies favor the son or daughter of the rich politician. That's not justifiable, and you can't describe that as some type of fair leveling of the playing field. It's just another form of racialism.
Pascalis, your question quickly.
Sorry, just one quick question. Just views on section 58B of the ECA, which requires operators or service providers to be registered under the laws of South Africa and have their principal place of business in South Africa. What are your views on that? Obviously regarding satellite service providers.
I think anywhere within the legislation where anywhere where there is a barrier based on either a person's race or their identity, I think there needs to be a challenge from it, whether it be from civil society or from political actors. I think there's a massive discussion to be had regarding that, and that's why I'm very glad that the discussion and the fiery debate here today has gone in that direction, because that's how the zeitgeist has changed. That's how hearts and minds are changed, and that's how we get to move forward towards something actually non-racial in this country. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much to the contributors from AfriForum. Thank you for your time.